This is Arlene Jones talking. In light of our sound problems, we didn't get a picture taken of the three presenters. So your presenters this evening will be myself, Arlene Jones, and I'll give you a brief introduction. I own and operate the farm on St. Matthias, south of Brainerd, with my husband. And after working for about 6 or 7 years and doing a CSA and local foods distribution and starting farm to school in the Brainerd area, it became clear that the demand was greater than the supply for my one farm. And I began networking with other farmers to meet the demand. In that process, local foods and the delivery system of local foods has been listed as a vital project for our region, and we worked with the Small Business Development Center at the CLC campus in Brainerd with Julie Anderholm, who is my co-presenter tonight, and we worked with BJ Allen from JBJ World as a researcher and facilitator and grant writer in conducting the feasibility study, which led to a business plan and the development of Sprout, Minnesota, which is a local foods aggregator and distributor for the region. And when we talk region, we're talking about a 7-county area, which includes Cass, Crow Wing, Aiken, Mille Lacs, Todd, Wadena, Morrison, and parts of Otter Tail. So I'm here tonight as a co-facilitator and a farmer, first and foremost, and a person who's working with boots on the ground to develop local foods distribution system in our region. So welcome and thank you.
Hi, this is BJ, and thanks again for coming and for bearing with us. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the presentation. We actually have quite a few slides to zip through, and for those of you that saw, how do we go through this?
You can just use your arrow keys to go through this. Bear with us for a second, you guys. You can just use your arrow keys, yeah, to go through this.
So this basically is a synopsis of the summary of the class that was given. We're going to be talking about the difficulties that small and mid-sized farmers are currently facing. And again, go into a little bit more detail about the efforts that have been happening here in central Minnesota for establishing a food hub. Talk about what a food hub is. And we actually had a couple polls out there for you all asking what your interest in the food hub was and if people are familiar with what a food hub actually is. So we'll be interested to see the results of those polls here.
And you can see the first one has been put up for you guys to respond to.
And then we're going to talk about the feasibility study that we actually conducted in central Minnesota, current market trends, what's going on in local foods market across the country. And Julie's going to go into a lot of detail about revenue expectations and how we went about making those calculations for the food hub. One of the things that we were thinking of in terms of being able to share this information with you all is if you're interested in starting a food hub in your region, you could do go through a similar feasibility study and create a business plan and so on. So it looks like the interest in the food hub is we've got 40% farmer growers interested in supplying the food hub. So it looks like a lot of you who are here are interested in supplying it. And it looks like we've got a few consumers and a couple who are interested in starting a food hub in your region. And a lot of people, 70% about interested in learning more about a food hub. So that's really helpful. We can kind of target our conversation to y'all.
So this is Arlene talking again, and we're going to jump back and forth through all of this. So when we talk about small family farms and marketing and distributing and the problems that small family farms face in our operations these days, we think about what you're looking at on the screen right now is big agribusiness farms and how that has shifted dramatically in the United States over the last 20 years. The statistics tell us that while the number of small commercial farms, as defined by the USDA, ranges between 10 and 249,000 in annual sales has drastically fallen, and the number of large operations has expanded. And most of the people that are sitting in the room here with us at Staples, and many of you out there online probably are well aware of that fact. One of the reasons for this is because of the shrinking market opportunities that are at a scale and a price which enables us as producers to remain viable. So alternately, we seek out different markets for our product in farmers markets, CSAs, and direct-to-consumers channels that are not sufficient to support our small farms. One of the efforts of the food distribution and the food hub is to work in a greater capacity in farmer-to-farmer networking to aggregate, which means work together to gather enough product to distribute and meet a larger scale demand, especially when we're talking about farm to school and farm to larger institution. And when you hear us talk about that through the course of this evening, when we say large institutions, we mean hospitals and other facilities that have a kitchen which produces or provides food for their customers. So the problem is that more smaller farmers and ranchers are challenged by the lack of marketing and distribution for their product. So while consumer demand has been increasing for the availability of these products, and which drives the demand, small family farmers have low capacity for distributing their product, and that's what we define as the problem. The other thing that I want to let you guys know is that if you have questions, please bring them up in the chat box or ask them in person for you folks here tonight. One of my philosophies is it's better to ask the question now as we're going through it so we can address it while we're at that topic through tonight, the presentation. And we have 3 laptops here and we're ready to slide our fingers across keyboards and answer questions as we go.
So this graph is just illustrating how much production right now in the United States is actually concentrated in those very large farms. So as opposed to the value of production that's in the smaller farms, there's actually very little value of production that's focused in the smaller farms. And just out of curiosity, I'll just ask the folks who are actually here in Staples tonight, how many of you consider yourself to be a small farm? So pretty much everybody here considers themselves to have a small farm. So that's something that has shifted really dramatically. Like Arlene was saying, in the last 50 years, is the value of production really has been shifting to those really large farms.
So the next one is, so how do you make a living if you're a small family farm? And most of us know that most of us farmers who have our small farms, somebody's working off the farm, somebody's making a living, providing for us while we're off the farm. So how do you make a living marketing from your small family farm these days? I can't, hold on a second, I can't, there we go. Whoop, hold on, sorry.
So one of the things that we did, Region 5 Development Commission based out of Staples has been working on the local foods issues in our region for quite a few years. And in 2008, they conducted a grower survey, and some of you probably participated in that survey. One of the questions that we asked was, what are the greatest difficulties that you have in expanding your market? And these are the responses that we got. A lot of folks had difficulty connecting to buyers. That's what they identified. 41% identified that as their biggest problem, was connecting to buyers. And then the next one is advertising and marketing, which is kind of really falls into the same area as connecting to buyers. How do you connect to buyers? How do you advertise? How do you market your products? So recognizing that these were some of the key issues, one of the things that we were looking at is, okay, well, what are some ways that we can help resolve those issues?
So after identifying, spending time reviewing that survey from 2008 and the work that we've done through our buyers meetings, through working with growers, through some of the work that's been done through Region 5, and also an awful lot of work that's been done through the regional partnership for the Central Region with its Pine and Lakes catalog, with the pilot programs that we've introduced with getting executive chefs connected to some buyers. With all of the feedback that we've gotten from that, what we came up with were these 6 items that we list as, so we've identified the problem, and as always, when you identify a problem, the way to get to something is to identify the solution. And the first one is to expand our market opportunities for small and mid-sized farms that include wholesale opportunities. So when we talk about wholesale opportunities, we talk about the programs that you see a lot of energy being spent these days, from University of Minnesota to Institute for Ag and Trade Policy in the cities, even the USDA with Farm to School, which many of you know that schools have very limited budgets, and that in order for them to participate in Farm to School, they have to be able to buy at a lower price, which means that small and mid-sized farms have to be able to compete with the Cisco and Apperts of the world. And yet, food service directors recognize that in order to buy local product, they're not going to be able to buy it at the same price that they would get bulk purchases or some of their bulk buying power from these big big distributors like the Cisco and Apperts. So somewhere in the middle, people like me have met with food service directors and have met with farmers and said, look, in order for us to compete with these big aggregators of product that's certainly not local and certainly not produced sustainable, we have to be able to meet somewhere in the middle between wholesale and retail. So small family farmers are getting raised income, and schools are getting the food, but also the person in the middle, which would be the food hub, is making some kind of profit in order to support the work that it's doing. So when we talk about expanding market opportunities and we talk about wholesale, we're not talking about 30 cents on the dollar when you can sell it for 70 cents on the dollar at the farmer's market, but we're talking about some kind of compromise where everybody's getting a little bit of profit and the food is moving and we're keeping it locally, which relocalizes at least 4 or 5 times as we spend those dollars in our communities. Then we talked about establishing infrastructure. In order to move pounds and pounds and pounds of food, there has to be infrastructure. Small farms don't have packing sheds. They don't have washing and packing and holding facilities. They don't necessarily have walk-in coolers that will hold more than what their farm produces. They don't have holding capacity for large-scale root cellar capacities where we're holding more than 50 to 100 pounds at a time. So we have that infrastructure. But when we speak about infrastructure, we're also talking about the physical plant where you have room for business and office and capacity to operate your operations, but also, which turns out to be one of the biggest barriers to doing a food hub, is a delivery system. How are you delivering 4,000 ears of corn on Monday morning to the school district if you only have your pickup truck? So infrastructure means actually buying delivery vehicles and refrigerated vehicles, along with refrigeration capacity, freezer capacity, and along with square footage in order to operate. So infrastructure was also listed as one of the things that we needed to identify for capacity building within the region. Aggregating from multiple farms. When we are working with 10 to 15 different farmers, we have to have some kind of system in place that makes it easy for the grower to deliver, for the buyer to pick it up, and for the distributor to distribute it. And so aggregating, as it turns out, is more than just that. It's getting it all together and then repackaging it for distribution. So you're getting 100 pounds of carrots from one farmer and you're getting 100 pounds of carrots from another farmer, and you have to put them in 5-pound bags because the school is going to redistribute them to 13 different schools once you deliver them. So aggregating, as it turns out, is not just simply picking up from one farm to another, but it's picking up, holding, and then packaging and then redistributing. So aggregating is probably one of the biggest pieces of work in local foods distribution. And then you've got connecting. connecting to local farmers and buyers to make it easy for buyers. And when we have up there single source, many of you have heard me talk about before one face, one invoice. Big food service directors, restaurant people in the middle of the height of their seasons don't have time for 15 to 20 different people coming to their back door with 5 or 10 pounds of a product. They are busy like all of us, and they want to be able to have the capacity to do local foods, but to keep it within the realm of one face, one invoice. And that has turned out to be very beneficial for a lot of the people that we work with, where working with one person makes it easy, because if they have a problem with the product, they only have to call one person. If they want additional product, they're only calling one person. They've only got one person that all their staff is dealing with, one person that they have to show the rules on how to get in and out of their facilities, how to hold within their refrigerated capacities, or one person where they're giving a security card to get in and out of their building because you're delivering at 5 o'clock in the morning before the kitchen opens. So connecting in single source is incredibly important and a very valuable marketing tool when you're dealing with buyers. Then there's creating marketing advantage for local buyers. Local restaurants use your name, your face, the name of your farm, and your products to their marketing advantage as often as they can, because consumers are continually demanding local product. So your farm, your face, and your story are highly valuable as a marketing tool to restaurateurs, executive chefs, but also to food service directors within the schools. They want their parents to know that they're going the extra distance to procure and prepare and serve local food to their kids. Why? Because parents are continually demanding it at greater and greater levels. So marketing advantage is not just a marketing advantage for executive chefs. It turns out it's a highly valuable marketing tool for food service directors. It's also a very valuable marketing tool for growers. That your food is on the plate of school-aged children is an advantage to you, because you can use that as a marketing tool for people that you direct market your product to, whether it is a restaurant, food service through a school, hospital, long-term care facility, CSA, or farmer's market. That your food is used in a farm-to-school program, or that you're working with a food hub and they value your product as a marketing tool for you. And then there are trends. Capitalizing on the current local foods market and its trends. And I think from the work that we've done in the last 6 years and being a farmer and working with the CSA, but also the work that we've done in the last 3 years with food hubs and working with farm to school, the current trends, we're on the cusp of it. I think that local foods is going to continue, that people are going to value more eating locally, but they're also going to have an emotional connection to spending their dollars and supporting their communities. And we get to take advantage of that. That marketing trend is something that we can use and utilize to advance the cause of growing local food and marketing it to the people who value purchasing it. Knowing our stories, being able to put a face to the name of the person that grew their food, knowing your story and having an emotional connection to that food is a very valuable marketing tool, and is also a trend that I think is going to continue.
So one of the things that we found in identifying this solution is there's a term for this, and it's called food hub.
Okay, so she caught me out a little bit I just talked for like 5 minutes. So I have a question here in Staples.
Are they specifically demanding organic, or that hasn't been an issue yet with the local food?
It's a very good question.
Can we
let me repeat the question. The question was, in the demand, in the trends and in the demands for local foods, are buyers demanding or requesting organic foods or local foods? And in my work and in the research that BJ done for the feasibility study, that you can see it up on your screen, it's part of the PowerPoint presentation, is that when people think local, they think they want to support the local growers and packers of their food. That whether it is organic or sustainable depends on who the buyer is. School districts, local is local is local. I have not heard any school district, and I've been working with large school district in Brainerd for 3 years. We added Piers last year, and I just met with Wadena, Sabika, Monaga, and some other schools over here in this area. Local is local. They're not asking for organic. However, if you're dealing with some of the more upscale restaurants that we work with in the Brainerd area, they value the organic and the sustainably produced, especially as we continue to see greater trends in gluten-free and chemical-free eating and lifestyles. So people who tend to be people who join our CSA are people who are highly interested in local, organic, or sustainably produced food. And it's because of a lifestyle trend where they have a gluten-free diet or they have rheumatoid arthritis, and eating chemical-free food has somehow lent itself to a greater capacity for health for them. So very good question.
Does anyone else have any questions while we're paused here? If you feel free to type them into the chat box if you've got any questions.
Okay, so when you look at the solution is farming. That's actually a slide from an early greens in the spring at our farm. The second picture is me working with some of the hydroponic growers here in the Staples-Motley area. And that's a large head of very beautiful hydroponically grown romaine. And one of those growers is in our audience tonight. The third picture is an actual farm-to-school delivery from a 5 through 8 grade school in Brainerd School District this year. And you can see they took everything from tomatoes to watermelon to sweet corn. And then the last slide is a restaurant in Brainerd, which has been one of the really, a big leader in local foods, in procuring local foods in the Brainerd area, Prairie Bay. So we'll give them a little bit of a thing here.
So again, we're talking about.
I'm going to answer this question.
Sure. We're talking about farmers. We're talking about aggregating produce. We're talking about delivering that produce and the infrastructure around that. And we're talking about connecting it to a buyer who has a potential marketing advantage like Prairie Bay. I'm sure everyone who's been to Prairie Bay, you see on their menu, they want to promote the fact that they're working with local growers on their menu. So it's a big deal. It helps them. We've got a question here in the chat box that says, is non-GMO request being seen here yet? Arlene?
I'm typing. I was going to do it by typing while you were still talking. So I'll answer it. From the co-ops that we work with, they absolutely want organic and sustainably produced foods and absolutely no GMOs. I honestly, from the work that we've done, and we're working with about 22 different farmers now, nobody I know is using any GMO crops at all. And okay, so she said she lost the sound. Does anybody still hear us besides people here in Staples?
It looks like
it's back. Okay. So I'll redo the, okay, thank you. Everybody can hear. The answer is, so the co-op in Brainerd, which is one of our accounts, absolutely does not want any kind of chemically produced products. Nobody that I know of that we are working with, and I'm also on the board for the Sustainable Farming Association, I don't know anybody who's actually growing GMO and marketing it as a locally grown product. Very good question. Okay, so what are the benefits? Everybody knows the benefits of locally grown foods. For every dollar that you spend on your local product, to your farmer, you're spending, that farmer's getting back somewhere between 70 to 85 cents. You buy your produce at Walmart, your farmer's getting about 3 cents on the dollar, okay? So your farmer's absolutely getting more of the gross product from, or the gross revenue from that product. But what else? What else? If you're spending your money locally and you're buying that product locally, the statistics show that for every dollar you spend locally, it gets relocalized 3 times. Okay, so every time you spend a dollar buying your food from your farmer or a farmer locally, that dollar stays in your community, whether your farmer goes and spends it at the hardware store or the pharmacy or at the Dairy Queen that's owned by your neighbor. Okay, that dollar is staying in your community 3 times. Environmental. We, in this food hub and every other food hub that we surveyed or researched during this feasibility study, only work with small family farms. When small family farms are producing product, they appear to be more conscious of their contribution and the effect that they leave on the environment from their production habits. So what does that mean? They're not using pesticides, they're not using herbicides, they're not using fungicides. They're conscious of their water consumption, they're conscious of their soil erosion, they're conscious of the impact that their farming leaves on their environment, and they have a greater capacity to care about what they do and what their impact is on their environment. They're probably using solar, they're composting, they're practicing animal husbandry. We don't have any big confined animal operations here. So the environmental impact. Then you have the social impact. And how do you measure what your social benefit is? Go ahead, I need a break on talking.
So there are a lot of different ways that we can go about looking at the social benefits of a food hub. And of course, the social benefits are often tied to the economic and environmental benefits and also into health. And so I mean, really all of these things are tied together.
I'll answer that.
One of the things that has come up recently as a big issue, which you all may be hearing a lot about, is the USDA has been talking about food deserts. And there are lots of food deserts in our region. And so one of the things that we can do is bring local foods into our food deserts so that hopefully will help to prevent obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and so forth, and get people starting to eat more fresh, local produce. So all of these things are tied together. This is a triple bottom line: economic, environmental, and social benefits. And everyone here gets the benefits of local food. So one of the questions that we were asking is, when is everyone else going to get it?
Let me just answer this a little bit. So I always talk about, you heard me say it earlier, about emotional connection. When people have an emotional connection, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's they know their car dealer and that's where they're going to buy their car. They know the local vet and that's where they're going to take their animals to. They know the story of the person that they're dealing with. They have an emotional connection to that purchase. That's a social benefit for a farmer. When you can tell your story and when people can put your face to your food, they have an emotional connection to you. And as it turns out, they're more likely to spend a little bit more money to buy your food. That's a social connection. But they also know your story and they care about you and they want to support you. And it makes them feel good to know that they're spending their money supporting their neighbor versus spending their money and sending it to the Waltons in Arkansas. Okay? That's a social benefit. As it turns out, your health benefits are also part of the social benefits. So many statistics out there on eating more whole food. Okay? We grow whole food. We're not growing chicken nuggets, we're not growing fish sticks, we're not growing tater tots, and we're not growing meat in a box, okay? Nobody should be eating meat from a box. Meat in a box is bad and nobody should eat it, okay? Health benefits, as it turns out, rolls up into your social benefits. They're one and the same. When they know you, they know your story, they're gonna buy your food, and they're gonna be healthier for it because they're eating more whole foods, okay? What does that turn out to? It means we're going to reduce obesity, reduce diabetes, and keep our communities healthier. That's all part of the benefits. I have two questions on here. How has the response from the school lunch programs incorporating the fresh veggies from the kids' point of view worked? Depends on who you're talking to, Luke. If you talk to the kindergarten through the second graders at the districts that we work with, they are absolutely thrilled. These kids are eating their vegetables. There's no problem. You've probably seen some stories where kids are throwing their lunches away because they don't like the food that they're getting due to the Healthy Hunger Kids Free Act, and they're throwing their lunches away, and they're going home and complaining to their parents that they're not getting enough to eat. You look at the littler kids, the K through 2, K through 3. They're eating their lunches. They're not complaining. They like all of their choices. If you go through middle school and high school, these kids are discontented. They don't like all these fruits and veggies. They want that high carb food. They want those chicken nuggets. They want those fish sticks. They're throwing them away. So it depends on what age demographic you're talking about. I think that has to do with education from parents, and that farm to school starts at home. Farm to school doesn't start at school, so it's not school's responsibility for us to teach kids how to eat. It's farm to school should start at home, and parents have to take a greater responsibility for teaching their kids proper nutritional habits. I think that the generation that's raising those kindergartens through second graders are doing a better job than I did raising my kids, because my kids went through school eating chicken nuggets and French fries and whatnot. And I'm sorry, Amanda, but that's how it works. And then the other question was food deserts is a new term. And then Amanda did a really good job explaining what a food desert is, defined as low access communities where at least 500 people or 33% of the actual census tract reside more than 1 mile from a supermarket or a grocery store. And the USDA has done a lot of work identifying this in order to promote, support, and sustain small family grocery stores so that people have greater access to wholesome, healthy food. So in our 5-county region, every single county has a food desert, and some of the percentages of people within those census tracts is as high as 87% of people in that census tract are in a food desert. It's a really, and there's a nice map of the food deserts throughout the United States. If anybody's interested, we'll throw that link up at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's on the USDA website. It's easy to find.
Okay, so as BJ said, okay, I lost my little control here a second. So we all get it. So when is everybody else going to get it? Well, turns out that they do get it, because consumers prefer freshness and taste above affordable price, which means consumers are willing to spend a little bit more money in order to have more tasteful food, and they're not really necessarily concerned about spending a few extra dimes on their food. Save money. You can save money even when you're spending more money to buy local foods. Why? They last longer. That hydroponically romaine that we're sending to the school districts, I've had hydroponically grown romaine in my refrigerator for 3 weeks, and it's still just as good as it was the day it was picked. It still has its root ball intact, and it's still growing. If you store your locally grown food appropriately, you can eat it for a very, very long time. It's personally beneficial. It's fresher. It's better tasting. It's healthier. It's being picked at its peak of ripeness when it's at its greatest capacity for its nutrients. It tastes better. It's not being shipped green and gassed on its way up from Florida. You knew that Tomatoland book was going to come out eventually, right? He basically, one of our audience members here said that he used to work in a warehouse and he knows how it works. For those of you who have not read Tomatoland, it's a very good book. It's actually a great expose on the cardboard tomatoes that we get to eat in the wintertime because they're picked absolutely rock hard green in Florida, and then they're stored in warehouses and gassed with ethylene, which is the natural gas which turns tomatoes and bananas and peaches and other produce to its ripe state. It's gassed in the warehouse or gassed on its way up here to us, and tastes like cardboard by the time we get it, but Local foods are better tasting because we pick them at the point when they're the absolute ripest and when they have the greatest capacity to provide their nutrients to us. It supports local producers. We've done the statistics already. We know that for every dollar you spend locally, it gets relocalized 3 more times. And for every dollar you give directly to your farmer for his product, he gets somewhere between 70 to 90 cents per dollar versus 3 to who knows what. And the Waltons don't need any more money. Supports the local economy. It's less harmful to the environment. We talked about that sustainable farmers have a greater capacity to protect our environment because they're conscious of what their effect is. And then you get the interaction with producers. I think that some of the greatest stories with Farm to School are because farmers are going into the classrooms and the kids get to connect the story of where their food comes from. It's not grown on the produce shelf at the local supermarket. It's actually grown at a farm, and they get to know the farm. The more we can get kids into farms and back out onto farms, the greater they're going to have that interaction. I keep doing that. Okay, we talked about this one already. The market trends are, this is one of the statistics that BJ pulled out in the feasibility study in her research, that a much higher proportion of people eat locally grown than organic foods. When they think local, they think fresh and want to support their local growers and packers. And that is certainly a trend that I see in working with schools and restaurants and other consumers in the area, with the exception of people who join CSAs. People who join community-supported agriculture's models of ag are highly aware of organic versus non-organic, and they know what sustainable is. And so they pay a little bit more for that CSA because they want to eat that product that's grown without chemicals. Does anybody not know what a CSA is? Anybody out there in the audience? We'll get a little definition up there if anybody doesn't know what it is. Okay, we have a question here in the audience.
I'm wondering about how much you have to actually educate consumers or people buying from you as far as preparation or, what to do with certain vegetables. There's some that people haven't, have thrown away from, things like eggplant or something like that.
Or kohlrabi.
Yes.
Or, okay.
Do you have issues with people asking you or how do you take it?
It's a very good question. And the question was, if we spend a lot of time educating consumers on the products that we grow and then how to utilize them. And the answer is yes. Mostly it is CSA consumers, people who buy a share. Most farmers who grow CSAs tend to grow a variety of highly different products. The statistic is that we get 2% of the seeds that are available are actually what's grown for us to consume. That's what we have access to in our supermarkets. So people who do CSAs purposely grow odd and different things. For one, because it's fun and we like to have fun doing what we do, and we like to grow odd stuff because if we're going to work that hard, we should have some fun too. And because it's fun, and it's fun to educate your consumers. And it's also fun to see, can I actually grow an Armenian melon in Minnesota? And, can I actually grow Russian watermelon in Minnesota, or, this melon that was grown in, south of the equator in our limited Minnesota season, if I give it enough time in the greenhouse, can I actually get it to produce? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we do grow a lot of odd stuff, and we do spend a lot of time educating consumers on what it is and how to use it. So CSAs typically spend a lot of time talking to them, but they'll also put recipes in their boxes or their shares for the week, not only telling them what they're getting, but how to prepare it with recipes and whatnot. Above that, I spend a lot of time talking to executive chefs of restaurants on how to have seasonal menus versus gourmet menus. So if you're truly going to eat local, you're going to prepare and produce and serve what's available on the Minnesota market when it's harvest time for that specific product. And you're not going to ask for asparagus in September and call it local, because it's not going to happen. So a lot of our time is spent educating executive chefs on seasonal menus and a seasonal palette versus a gourmet palette. And don't ask me for strawberries in September, and don't ask me for asparagus in September, because it ain't going to happen. not locally anyway. So good question, and the answer is yes.
So this is part of the, it is a really great question, and that's definitely part of the mission of the Food Hub, and it's part of the mission of food hubs actually across the country, is this recognition that there needs to be consumer education that goes along with the Food Hub. And Arlene actually has also spent hours and hours with the food service directors of the school district in Brainerd, developing a local foods menu. And it's a really cool thing because Colette Polkamp, who's a food service director in Brainerd, actually is in charge of purchasing for the other school districts, for some of the other school districts in the region. And so she totally has the capacity to be able to share those menus with other school districts. And so it's a great way for the system to kind of continue to grow. Want to add anything more to the school district?
No, we can talk more about that when we get towards the end. If people have questions, how does it work and how did you build that system? Let's focus on kind of getting to the state of the food hub part. But we'll certainly ask those questions. And Donna, the answer is that you're absolutely in the region for a food hub in Brainerd. And we are delivering food to Pine River even now. So the Hug campus in Pine River takes some of this locally grown romaine. But also I'm working with a couple of farmers in Pine River to be part of the food hub. Remember when we talked about the food hub, we talked about the regional component of it. And the region that we use to draw the data for the food hub is Cass, Crow Wing, Todd, Morrison, Wadena, Aiken, and even parts of Otter Tail. So Jenkins is absolutely in the realm of possibility, and I live in Nisswa. I can drive to Jenkins. So the next slide talks about market trends, and this is all data that was culled from BJ doing the feasibility study research that. U.S. fruit and vegetable wholesale markets show a 5-year growth projection of 8%. 8% in 5 years for all U.S. consumables of fruit and vegetable on a wholesale market is huge, absolutely huge. And we'll get to some bigger numbers and you'll see what we're talking about in a little while. 85% of consumers state that local food is an important factor in the decision-making of the produce that they buy. That 85% say if they have a choice versus local versus not, they will choose local. 89% of fine dining operators serve locally sourced items. That's a huge number. And remember when we talked about the marketing capacity of local foods? If you walk into some of the restaurants in Brainerd, the logo of the farmers that they're working with is up on their board because consumers recognize branding and they recognize marketing and they're using it to draw more people in because they're marketing that they use local foods. So whether you produce honey, eggs, beef, pork, they're going to use it and they're going to use your brand. They want to partner with you. There's no local produce. There is no locally produced item that's off the radar of buyers, from wild rice to honey to proteins to eggs to wild edibles. People are even getting into using more wild edibles. 1 in 6 Americans go out of their way to buy local products. Most of you who are in this room and listening to this conference absolutely know the value of purchasing locally and supporting your neighbors and your communities. And as it turns out, one out of every 6 Americans recognize that as well.
So I've got a quiz for you following on that. So that's knowing that 1 out of 6 Americans will go out of their way to buy local foods. What percentage of Americans do you think would buy local foods if it were convenient? If it were conveniently available, what percentage would buy local? Any guesses?
You can type them in the chat box or you can shout them out.
Should we wait for the time?
If it were convenient.
He asked if he should wait until you guys type them in there, but.
So again, if it were convenient.
Thanks, Luke.
How
Luke says
many
95%.
The same price?
The survey didn't specify the price. It's just like if it were super convenient, what would you buy local? Luke, that's a really great guess. 95%. Joanne says 75. Any guesses here in the audience? 60, about 65, 66, yeah. So the answer is 90%. So if it were convenient, I mean, only 1 out of 6 are going to go out of their way, but if it were convenient, 90% of Americans would buy local products. So the question is then, how do we make it convenient?
Okay, BJ, I'm gonna let you talk about this one.
Luke says, I win. Nice. And Donna, we see this question here. How is distribution accomplished in the north part of Crow Wing County? Do you want to talk about that now, Arlene, or do you want to hold that for later?
No, I'll talk about it now. I like to do it while they're up so we don't forget them. So distribution in the northern part of Crow Wing County is accomplished by the one-on-one interaction with the buyer and the distributor, which would be me, working with 20 different farmers and our staff. And basically, it's by distribution route. When is it convenient? Are we already going up there? Do we have a CSA drop in that way? Can we make it so we reduce the impact of mileage and fuel consumption for the northern part? So our CSA goes up to Nisswa, and we deliver to Pine River for the Hug campus up there. So we would connect it to those days when we're doing that. Or like I said, I live in Nisswa, I'll bring it on my way home. Which is what I typically do a lot for Grandview Lodge. It's on my way home, and I will just drop it off on my way home. But that arrangement is already, I've already negotiated that arrangement with the executive chef of that facility. So does that answer your question? Okay, BJ.
So we're talking about the trends of the market. What's the capacity of our local farming systems? And just looking at central Minnesota versus Minnesota as a whole and the United States as a whole, the land area dedicated to farming here is a lot smaller. And you probably, maybe you don't recognize this as much out here in Staples, but obviously like over in Cass and in Crow Wing counties, there's a lot of wooded areas, and Aiken as well. And so, so in central Minnesota, there isn't as much land area dedicated to farming as there is in the state of Minnesota as a whole. What percentage of crops do you think? Okay, so yeah, sorry about that. One thing I wanted to mention too is that an interesting fact in central Minnesota is there's actually a little bit over 70% of central Minnesota value from agricultural production comes from livestock. And in Minnesota as a whole, it's roughly like 43 or 44%. So it's really significant in central Minnesota. There's a lot of livestock production in our region. What percent, so a specialty crop means fruit or vegetables, so apples and cabbages. So in the state of Minnesota, of all of agricultural revenue, what percentage do you think is specialty crop production? So including all of the livestock, including all of the grains, all the soybeans, all the corn, what percentage of that total revenue from all agricultural products in Minnesota comes from specialty crops? The food that you sell at the farmer's market. What do you think? The answer's there. Oh, everybody knows. Well, the answer is, of course, what did you say? I'm sorry.
I said probably in the single digits.
The single digits, yeah, it's a good guess. It's 3.5%. So again, the reason why we bring this up is because we see this as a tremendous opportunity. You know, we can make that number bigger.
Okay, so regional potential. When we talk about our potential, there, I don't have the statistic in front of me for the total food consumed within our central Minnesota 8 counties. But I know, and BJ, I'll ask you to talk about this 16 and 52 weeks down there a little bit more. Remember we reconfigured this one? So
this slide is all about determining the market demand. So one of our questions in our feasibility study when we're looking at can we justify starting a food hub in central Minnesota? One of our questions was, well, do we have consumer demand? Do we have that market in central Minnesota? And so we said, well, how can we figure that out? And so what we did, you know, some of the other food hub studies have done different things. They have done like buyer surveys and so on. What we decided to do was we said, okay, let's look at a slice of the total food that's consumed in central Minnesota. And we're going to start with a really, 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 really conservative slice, because we want to know what's the baseline, the absolute baseline. This is like, we could reach this level. And so what we said was, okay, this is the total amount of food consumed. This is the total amount of money people spend on food in central Minnesota. And then we said, okay, what's the fresh fruits and vegetables slice of that pie? And then we said, of those fresh fruits and vegetables, of course, you've got bananas and pineapples, things we can't grow in central Minnesota. So we're going to exclude those. So they're domestically sourced. And then we're also going to say, okay, we're only going to say we can supply 16 out of 52 weeks, because that's our growing season. So we took the total food, cut it down, cut it down, cut it down. And what we found for the total dollar amount of food that we could sell with all of those constraints was $4.7 million. So this is the absolute super conservative figure. It's only talking about fresh fruits and vegetables. So what are the other foods that you could supply through a food hub or from a farm?
And remember, this is only 16 out of 52 weeks.
This is not considering
extremely
hoop
conservative.
house, hydroponics.
You're supposed to ooh and ah right now.
Come on.
So BJ asked the question, so what other products and how would we, and this might relate a little bit to Luke's question, which he just put in the chat box, which says, how would the local food hub keep working throughout the winter months? And the answer is that the opportunity, and Donna, you nailed it. You said some folks are pushing 300 days a year in high tunnels. Absolutely. We produced in high tunnels through December. We're going to start them up again in March. That means we lost only 60 days. So you got the 300 days is a really good mark for high tunnels. And then you've got producers that are doing year-round production, hydroponically, and through some other conventional methods of growing through high tunnels year-round. And while much of that has not been completely measured on costs, versus return on investment. We're working on that, and we're also doing some of the research for some solar-powered high tunnels, which is going to be really cool, and we'll talk about that next year at Local Foods College. So when we talk about opportunity, if you look at this slide, and BJ, you probably know this one a little bit better than I do, about what our opportunities are, and you look at what our potential are for processed vegetable consumption, processed fruit consumption, that we have the potential, which would be another phase of a food hub in building capacity within our region for value added. We do not have very many opportunities in our region for utilization of licensed kitchens to use our culled products and our second products to turn them into value added for frozen vegetables, canned juices, or other items that we could have another tier of revenue for our farms if we had value-added processing facilities in our region. So that was identified as an opportunity that we are currently missing because much of that product is laying in fields unharvested or in highly rich compost piles scattered throughout the region.
Another thing too is that of the total vegetables and fruits that people consume, about half is fresh and about half is processed. So you figure if there's $4.7 million worth of fresh produce potential in central Minnesota, there's another $4.7 million at least of processed. So right now we're up to $9 million between processed and fresh.
I don't know about the rest of you, but $9 million makes me go, ooh. Come on, guys. Ooh. Okay, so there's a question on the chat box about, can you talk about the opportunity for local meats? Thank you, Jessica. Local meats, while that is not a product that the food hub currently in operation in Brainerd is moving right now, it's absolutely an item that we want to be in the business of procuring, aggregating, and distributing. School districts, because of their limited budgets, because of all of the extra work in meeting the Healthy Hunger Kids Free Act, do not have the money to buy locally produced proteins. So any kind of meat, chicken, beef, lamb, whatever it is. However, the market for upscale restaurants and other places to sell those proteins is immense. And you will hear in a lot of the surveys that we've done of buyers that is one of the barriers to increasing their local foods on their menus is they don't have access, they don't have continuous supply, or the cost of it is out of the reach of their menus. So while it's not something that we see moving a lot of, we also know some growers that are really good marketers of their products, and they are moving a lot of proteins to upscale restaurants in our region, and a lot of pounds of meat going into the cities to those restaurants down in the cities.
Again, just for not to exclude meats or other proteins or honey or any other sorts of items from the potential market here, this was just the methodology that we went about in terms of figuring out, okay, simply we can start really easily, like we can start tomorrow delivering fresh produce. And so let's start with this very simple part, the simplest thing to do, and then we'll build up from there. Getting a processing facility up and off the ground, or cooperating with another facility like CLC Staples campus here and utilizing their kitchen space, it's just another layer, a little bit more complexity. And so we thought we'll start with the simplest place to start and go from there. And that's part of this. That's just the way that we did the study.
You can probably answer this question, BJ, because I know you got a list from the Department of Health.
I have a very, there's actually a big list of the value of processing facilities, licensed processing facilities in this study, as part of the appendix. And you can get the study off of the Resilient Region website. If you email me, it'll probably be the easiest way to find a link to the study, and you can get the appendix right off of that study.
Go ahead.
So again, one of the things that we looked at in terms of the opportunity for processed vegetable consumption was we said, okay, or processed fruits and vegetables, we said, okay, well, what are the processed fruits and vegetables that are most commonly consumed? If they're pineapples, it doesn't do us any good. So what we found out was 8 of the top 10 processed vegetables that are consumed can be grown in central Minnesota. So again, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to also be selling a lot of processed foods.
I was just, Donna, we will attach that link. I'll post it on the chat box, or BJ will, as we continue through. So we won't lose sight of that, but I don't know if we'll get it done right now, because we're going to try to continue to move through these so we get through all of this and then into the financials with Julie. I do this all the time. Good thing you guys can't see all the mistakes I make on here. Okay, so out of that 2008 grower survey that Region 5 did, one of the questions that we asked the growers was, where are their sales channels right now? And I know it's probably hard for you guys to see this, but the number one sales channel was direct via on-farm sales, direct via farmers markets, direct to restaurant, and direct to grocery store. With very, very few of them doing direct to schools, hospitals, co-ops, grocery stores, or through any of the wholesale markets. And so when we looked at this slide, we understood that those are opportunities for markets within our region. And that's kind of what this slide stands for. Anything else on that one? Does anybody have any questions? Any audience questions while we're going? Okay, so how do you increase the revenue? Expand your offerings, okay? This is a good segue for me to talk about how we did Farm to School. and how we used some of the work that we knew we had to do for creating menus. In order for us to supply enough food to a school district that serves 5,000 meals a day, we met with the food service director back in March, and we created the menus in order to know what growers were going to grow that year to provide to the school that fall. Now, farm to school is a limited market because it's September, October, and as you all well know, we're not growing a whole lot in the fields in November. But the capacity for us to expand our offerings of the fresh stuff that we knew was vulnerable to the season in September and October, like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and all the stuff that's going to freeze in the fields during the first big frost, is what we pushed in those September menus. So we did a lot of peppers, we did a lot of cucumbers, we did a lot of tomatoes, we did a lot of whatever else was available. Sometimes you still have, we did beans the first year even. It was a great year, we still had beans. So then, and we didn't focus on things that we knew we had the capacity to store until we were done with all of those fresh items. Okay, so we didn't do carrots, we didn't do potatoes, we didn't do squash, and we didn't do fall radishes or any of those types of things until all of that vulnerable product was gone. And that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about expanding your offerings. Know your market. What kind of stuff does your food service director want to grow? Especially know your restaurants. If you have an upscale restaurant, or what do they like? Not all chefs are created equal, and some might like more heirloom tomatoes than others. Some might like heirloom cucumbers. Some might like working with broccoli and cauliflower, and some of them could care less if they ever saw it. So expand your offerings and know your markets. Extend growing seasons. Many of us have gotten into high tunnels. We've taken advantage of some of that NRCS funding. We're learning how to do high tunnels more. Extend your growing season. Start earlier, stay longer. However you can do it. Learn how to use a root cellar. That's another way to extend your growing season. Grow more that you know you can store and that you have a market for. Extend your storage ability. Have a root cellar. Our root cellar at the farm is an old basement cylinder block that I heat with a 280 watt bulb and a box fan for your house all winter long. And it keeps it at 36 and relative humidity at about 80. Know your relative humidity. Not all products are created equal. I can keep potatoes and carrots down there, but squash and onions, it's too humid and they absolutely rot and mold within the first month. So know the storage capacity and extend your storage ability. And then again, processing capability. Identify if you have any processing capabilities, identify the facilities that you have access to, and then utilize them to extend your processing capacity and capability. There you go. Donna has indicated our last harvest date was Thanksgiving using row covers and low tunnels. There's some good research out there using low tunnels within high tunnels in order to further extend your growing season, using those row covers out in the field to protect your product from frost. I harvested the day before Thanksgiving as well. We ate kale and radishes out of the field, actually. The day before Thanksgiving this year. So understand what your growing capacity is too. French breakfast radishes are not going to grow in the fall, but those daikon radishes love cool weather. Restaurants and school districts will use them until they're gone. So understand what varieties that you can grow in the capacity of our Minnesota season, and extend your season that way by experimenting with some varieties as well.
One of the beauties of the Food Hub is that the Food Hub is also working on all of these things with the local farmers and with the buyers. So the Food Hub can serve as the link between the buyers, figuring out what it is that they're really interested in serving at their restaurants or at the school, and link that with the farmers, the growers. So the Food Hub can really facilitate a lot of this increase in revenue, which is potentially for individual growers as well as benefiting the Food Hub. So,
okay, so I know we got to zip through these so we can get done. Sales avenues, direct to consumer. Direct to consumer would include school districts, restaurants, on-farm site, farmers markets, et cetera. And then your wholesale markets, which include more bulk purchases by large institutions. And don't underestimate the ability to sell to anybody. If you have a great product, you can sell your product. There's a market for everything out there. CSA, we added the component of the CSA to the food hub for two reasons. It is a revenue generator and helped build the first years of sustainability for the food hub by moving the CSA from our farm out into the food hub, and by also working with another farm who is no longer going to do a CSA and capitalizing on that mailing list to gain that revenue from that CSA. A CSA is a model that works very effectively for generating revenue in the beginning of the year. It is a huge commitment, but it is also a lot of fun. And I'll answer your question in just a second, Luke. I want to get through some of these.
It's also easier for the food hub to do a CSA because the CSA is already aggregating produce from multiple growers.
She should be a farmer, shouldn't she? She's good. She is absolutely correct. And this year, Sprout, Minnesota, which is the name of the food hub, is doing what we call a market share, which is not a CSA from my farm anymore, but it's going to be a CSA of whatever is on the market for that week is what they're going to get in their share, because we're working with 15 to 20 different farms. So they might see some hydroponic lettuce, and I bet that they will in their CSA share. They might get carrots from Mel's farm. They might get tomatoes from somebody else's farm, but they're going to get the best of what's available on the market. And I think that it's a great opportunity to have a more diverse share and for more farmers' stories to be heard, and more consumers are going to be able to get to know the farmers in their region better. And I think that's a great building capacity of farmer-to-farmer networking, but also farmer-to-consumer networking. And probably we'll be able to get a lot more consumers out on some of the farms, which I think is also going to be very educational and a big benefit to consumers in the long run. Okay, so we talked about these wholesale markets include grocery stores, your schools, your institutions such as hospitals, and then of course your executive chefs. And the way that I look at it is any place that serves food to people is an institution and a market. And more of those institutions are becoming interested in doing local foods, including hospitals, long-term care centers, nursing homes. There's even a huge amount of money being invested in farm-to-child care this year. So daycares, that kind of thing. Identify your champions. That's that hydroponic lettuce. The picture on the right is Vicki King, who is boiling sweet corn for the kids at the school. When we put Vicki's picture up here, we know that Vicki's a champion because Vicki's a leader who will lead 15 to 20 of her staff in shucking all that corn and then serving it to the kids and doing it gleefully and delightfully because they believe in what they're doing and they believe that they're feeding the kids a more nutritious meal, and they're doing the right thing. And what do I call that? I call that an emotional connection. Okay?
Arlene, you gotta tell them the story about the squash.
Okay. So a great story about squash is no little kids like to eat squash. And one of the schools in the Brainerd district is listed as one of the poorest schools because it has the highest number of kids on free and reduced lunch. A year ago, they wanted to serve the kids squash to see how it would go. And so we served them a variety of squash. And I went into the school and I stood next to the serving line and I talked to the kids about squash and its benefits and its color and its vitamin A and why it was good for them and why they should be eating it. But also these kids are in a district that my farm is in. So a lot of these kids go past my farm every day on that school bus and they know the farm, or they've been there for the corn maze and hay rides, which is another part of the farm that we do. So they've been there and they know the farm, which was also a benefit because they had that connection. So they ate their squash, and we went through the next school year, and we got summer, and we got September and October, and she didn't, food service director, none of the people, none of her champions within her schools were asking for squash. And then 2 weeks later, she calls me up and she says, "Do you have any squash left?" And I said, yeah, I do. Why? Well, the kids at Harrison are asking where their squash is this year. Can you send them 80 pounds? And I'm like, I absolutely positively can. But who would have ever thought that the kids would actually be requesting that squash? And the reason for that is because it was fall, they probably remembered it, they had a memory of it, and they asked for it because it was something new and different, okay? How they're serving it is another story, but the fact that they're asking for it goes to show you that if you can get in there and you can give them a visual, you can talk to them and you can tell the story, that they're going to have that connection. And then the reality is that they're going to start asking for it. So, and that's a great story. Identify your community assets, your schools, your governmental institutions, your churches, and whatnot. When we talk about community assets, our community assets in the Food Hub project are the school district, who's willing to partner with us to lease space in order to operate a food hub within their warehouse where they already have a loading dock and they have ample space for us. They understand that their food will be delivered from their warehouse, and we get to partner with them in the delivery of the food within the district. They're already moving trucks and they're willing to partner us. But we had to identify that. We had to get in there and have those conversations and start that partnership in order for that to happen. Another champion and community asset is this school and this campus. This campus has some storage capacity that we're researching how to utilize. It also has a kitchen that we're researching how to use for value added. I hear a lot of rumbling out there. I thought it was us.
Yeah.
Okay, Julie.
Let's address Luke's question before we switch over to Julie.
Okay, so Luke's question is, would the Food Hub have a facility where direct consumers would be able to buy, or would you need to be a member of a CSA? And the answer is that direct consumers would be able to buy. That part of the Food Hub is working wholesale with schools and hospitals and whoever else at wholesale prices, but also the CSA. The other part of it is that my hope would be that the Food Hub would be able to service outlets where you already get locally grown food in our area, including the food co-ops, which have a limited capacity to buy large scale from their distributors in the cities. So if the Food Hub was able to have larger volumes of food, then the co-ops and the small scale stores that carry locally grown food would be able to order from the Food Hub, and you would be able to go buy it retail from the co-ops. One of the things that I stress and I say all the time, I don't want to compete with food co-ops and I don't want to compete with farmers markets, because we've worked really hard for those marketing avenues, and we don't want to backpedal at all on any of that work. So we're not going to compete. We don't want to compete with farmers markets, and we don't want to compete with food co-ops for the retail part of it.
So the direct consumers would be able to purchase the local foods through the grocery stores and other outlets, and not actually at the Food Hub. Okay, so the next thing is the revenue methodology, which is Julie.
And
Amanda's going to be able to.
yeah,
switch.
Amanda, you can hear us, correct? Hello? Okay, so Julie's just going to tell you what slide to put up when you need it, because we printed it out. So what you guys are going to see is, as Julie's doing some of the financials, we're going to go back and forth between the PowerPoint and some Excel spreadsheets that have been PDF. So that's what you're going to see, and Julie's going to take the lead here.
Just to give everyone a little, just to back up just a little bit and talk about the big picture for a second again, you know, just in terms of our feasibility study and proving the merit of establishing a food hub in central Minnesota, we looked at the trends, we looked at the market potential. So the next thing that we needed to do is to show, okay, can we actually make this work from the revenue side? And so that's when we enlisted the help of Julie at the Small Business Development Center in Brainerd.
Hello. I should have been first because a lot of people gloss over when they see numbers, but we'll be number friendly. So hopefully it'll all make some sense. So just a brief overview with this screen, the basic steps of how we came up to determine that this is a financially feasible project. My background is finance. I work with many small businesses determining whether they should proceed with a project or not. And the Food Hub is just like any other project. If it's not financially feasible, it doesn't pay to continue all the efforts, but we very much found that it was a financially feasible project. So this is the brief overview. Amanda, if you want to go through to slide number 1, that would be great. So we've referenced the 2008 study a lot, or the survey. There was also a 2012 survey that was completed, and that kind of started the source of information to move forward. And I'm not exactly sure
You
how
can use
to.
your,
This one here.
yeah, you can use, to move through that, you can expand and,
Can we, okay, and we can shrink it a little bit. So, the survey was conducted in the spring of 2012, and there were 31 respondents. So this information was accumulated, and that was the starting point of really the financial information. So what you see on this slide is just a snapshot of some of the information on the survey and how it was accumulated. Basically, it was split out by the type of product. So we sorted it out between vegetables and fruit, and then each vegetable had a category. And the numbers and the information that we wanted to accumulate on this slide was basically the product, how many growers, and how many pounds were grown already locally in our area, in this region. So you can see that what's highlighted on this screen are the 3 yellow components. Cucumbers, for example, there were 7 growers, and the number of pounds that were grown were 13,000. Okay, so for every product, we had this information. Amanda, if you want to go to slide 2. Now, this is where some of your eyes are probably going to gloss over. It's a lot of information, a lot of numbers, but basically we called it our matrix. And our matrix was an accumulation of a lot of financial data. And what we decided to do is there were, let me get my notes, there were 27 vegetable products and 7 fruit products that were grown. Rather than keeping track of all this information by 33 categories, we decided to group those vegetables and group the fruit into categories or groups that had a similar type of sale price per pound. It was a little bit more manageable to group it into these categories. So what you see here on this screen as part of the products, you'll see this is group number 1. And in group 1, we had onions, potatoes, cabbage, and there's our cucumbers, our highlighted 7 growers with cucumbers. And as we go through the slide, the information that was detailed was the acres it would take to grow those, pounds that were grown by product, what as a percentage of what was grown. We tried to be conservative to say it would take how many acres, and we did 67% of what a typical acre would produce. We cut that back to 67% to be conservative, to say we're not going to get all those acres in that production. So we tried to add measures of conservatism in our financial projections in order to not say we could overproduce or oversell.
We were also in that 67%, we were also assuming that the food hub would only accept a certain grade of product. We're only going to accept the best grade, and so we're going to get rid of the lower grades, and so we're going to say, okay, this is going to produce 67%. This acre will produce 67% of what we will accept.
Okay, I'm going to try to move over. Is this going to let me move over?
One of
There
the
we go.
other reasons why we grouped the products together, we also categorized them according to packaging requirements, because it turns out that packaging is actually a pretty significant expense for a food hub. When you talk, and actually like cherry tomatoes is a great example. Cherry tomatoes were their own group because they're very unique in terms of the price per pound, and of course the packaging, as everyone is well aware.
So we did an internal study, I think a couple meetings. All we did was discuss packaging, the packaging costs, and the labor costs by these products. So as you can see, column 10 is the packaging labor per unit, and the unit was typically pounds or a number of pounds. And then we have packaging costs per unit as well. So we tried to detail out by these categories. And then you see that highlighted yellow number, that 13,000 was the pounds that were brought over from the survey. Okay, so by group, we accumulated the weighted average of packaging cost, labor cost, and then sale price per pound. So as I move over a little bit farther, what you're going to see in this far to the right number at 46 cents per pound, that was a weighted average sale price per pound for the group. Okay, so those numbers that are highlighted in green get transferred over to the next slide. Trust me, we recheck these numbers. So, yeah, and rechecked them again. BJ, do you have?
Another thing that I wanted to mention, Julie, if I could, is that when Arlene and I first met with Julie, and we went over some of the existing food hub feasibility studies, and we're like, well, can we model the financials the way that they did? And Julie's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. We can't do it that way. And so we really took a lot of effort to go through this step by step. And we looked at Chicago terminal pricing and so forth to figure out what would be the most conservative price for this particular product. We averaged it out over the course of the season, and we did a whole bunch of other things to really try to make this a robust financial projection.
That related to our area. That's the most important, because every food hub, if it's located in New England, it's going to look a little bit different than located in central Minnesota. So that was very important. One of the things that I just want to point out is one of the numbers that's highlighted in green, that weighted average sale price to growers at 46 cents. That's for group one. That's the lowest price. Our groups ranged all the way up to $2.27 per pound. And you'll see that as we go through. And that's just for the vegetables. Fruits, some of the fruits were a little bit higher because they're a little bit more specialized. Amanda, if we can go through to the next slide.
This is Arlene. I just want to say, from a grower's perspective, we spent a lot of time thinking about labor costs and what it costs to harvest cherry tomatoes and pack them versus what it costs to harvest watermelons and pack them, and the price per pound difference between cherry tomatoes and watermelon. And I think that it's really important to stress that, because we spent a lot of time making sure that we were being realistic about packaging and labor costs, but yet also conservative on that 67%, because not everything's going to go to market.
Amanda, can you make this a little bit bigger? I'm better at talking and not so great at manipulating the computer. So if it works for you to make it a little bit bigger, that would be great. So the next step is to recap. Started from the survey, organized the data from the survey, then moved it into the matrix where we added internal studies for labor costs and packaging costs, Chicago commodity trade prices. Then we moved into the first year projection. And if you can see, and I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but it's split out between those 7 groups in vegetables and the 3 groups in the fruits. So the numbers that are highlighted, that first number to the left-hand side is the 46 cents per pound. And I apologize that it's really slow. I think or small, excuse me. And then you can see the labor cost per pound was brought in, as well as the packaging cost per pound. So those numbers are brought in, thank you, Arlene, directly from that matrix, okay? So in addition to that, what we also brought in was the number of pounds. And I want to show you that, once again, we were conservative in the number of pounds that are on the bottom is 196,000 pounds. And that's for the group 1 vegetable products. And that's from the survey. So we're getting information that was accumulated from the survey results. But we looked at those groups again and we said, okay, are there some risks to some of those products? And we said, yes, there are. In some groups, maybe they're a little bit more finicky in terms of the weather. So should we really assume that we're going to get 100% of that production? So you can see on the bottom by group, and these numbers are small, and I'll kind of move my cursor right over here. We are talking about having some of the percentages be a little bit lower. So for instance, in group 2, I can't get this out, we said that we were, or group 1, 2, 3, 4, we're only going to do 67% of that product because there might be some risks. So again, we tried to be conservative in the number of pounds that we felt could be produced. Going up on top, and again, I apologize, we can maybe send
these. If anybody wants any of this,
what was the constraint then on what could be produced, amount of land or number of growers, or
in terms of not using 100% of what was
what production are you trying to figure here?
We used the results of the survey. So we only use real-time data that we got back from farmers that the survey was sent to of those that responded. And some of those who we knew were not working with Food Hub or were not working beyond, they were already doing wholesale in other places. We excluded those numbers.
So this is what you think they could supply the hub?
What they were producing.
Right.
Their actual number.
Their actual numbers on what they said they could supply the hub. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
The actual numbers on what they said they could supply the hub. You need to understand that these are extremely conservative numbers because not every grower responded. And and I knew
Okay,
that's
so
why you were asking, is why I'm saying this. So this is not everybody's data. This is just the growers that responded to that survey that was sent out in 2012.
31 respondents.
30, so it was very low response rate. It was really low response rate. So again, you know, we're talking about, we talked about the market demand, and the market demand that we calculated was very conservative. Now we're talking about grower capacity. The grower capacity that we estimated is also very conservative. So we're trying to be as conservative as possible so that we can be realistic in terms of what we can actually, and I'm sorry if people can't hear me, but in terms of what we can actually achieve, you know, year 1, year 2, year 3.
Not promising everybody in the room are going to be a millionaire by
Exactly.
this time next year.
And just to recap what BJ is saying to the rest of the group is that we tried to be conservative pretty much every step in the way because we wanted it to be realistic.
Do you want to go over here and talk about this at all?
So just really briefly, so we accumulated by group vegetables, total the vegetable category. Then we accumulated the fruit by group and we calculated with our average sale price, we built in a 25% margin. So for instance, we said that the growers are basically going to get 75% of the sale price to the consumer. Okay, so it's a 25% margin going into the food hub to cover all the costs. So really, that's a good point to bring up is that the majority of the success of the food hub is really going to the farmers because you guys are doing the work. So we built in that 25% margin to determine the sale price. And then we accumulated the fruits and vegetables, all those groups into year 1 and came up with a year 1 total and then projected from that year 1 what type of growth that we thought we could achieve. And you can see I have things highlighted that track from one slide to the next. Again, they're a little bit hard to read, but basically the bottom line, oh yeah, if you see, yeah, we need magnifying glasses. The bottom line is year 3 is when we broke even. Now, a part of the numbers that we also had to add onto this, into this study, we did a separate CSA study. And if we keep continuing over,
Okay,
which I think Arlene is going to do, is we did a separate CSA study and brought those numbers in. And if you can see that number, if you go up a little bit higher, Arlene, the 150 members that we started off with the CSA is actually what happened last year. Between the CSA that Arlene, the farm ran, as well as the CSA that is not going to be in operation next year, that's the 150. So again, we were conservative because with the trends of people wanting to buy locally produced food and being more health conscious, we anticipate that CSA number is going to be higher in the first year. But again, trying to be conservative. We looked at a consistent food cost there of 50%, so a little bit more going to the bottom line of the CSA because there's some additional labor costs and overhead that have to be undertaken by the food hub.
We'll go over there.
But it's important that those that the CSA numbers are added into the food hub, and then as we go across, we have our 5-year financial summary.
That's as far as I can go in here. It doesn't show it all over there.
And it doesn't over here. The one thing, and this would probably really glass your eyes over, Amanda, if you go to that last slide, you'll see the overhead. There's the financial summary. So that's a year 1 through 5 financial summary, which basically shows a profitability in year 3. So we project some losses in year 1 through 2, thus grant writing and getting community involvement to try to support the project to move it into profitability. Amanda, if you can go to that last page 7, I'm just going to show you that we did a lot of detailed work to look at the facility costs, the delivery costs, the overhead costs, the rental costs. This screen is very long. It just goes down and details out all these different costs. And the point that I'm trying to make here is
Go to the screen here, click there. Jessica, I'll answer your question in just a minute.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah,
Yay,
yeah.
look at that. So if you can see this facility overhead in detail, it shows rent, it shows utilities, it has insurance costs. There's our vehicles and when we're going to buy the vehicles, because by year 4, we're predicting that we need a third vehicle, a smaller van for smaller routes, a refrigerated truck. So we tried to really look at the whole scenario of how the growth is going to take place in the food hub and what are the needs and when are those needs going to grow. And we need to have saved some money to buy maybe some additional equipment and that type of thing.
So you can see there's also facility improvements because we think we're going to be working with the school district in Brainerd and using their facilities, and we're going to have to upgrade some of their facilities in order to use them. We also think that we're going to be utilizing some space here at Staples for holding capacity in order to extend the reach of the food hub beyond the centralized region of the Brainerd Lakes area and start moving more west into the Wadena, Sabika, Monaga areas. And so you can see it gets down even to facility improvements, refrigerated trucks, storage trailers, et cetera.
The one thing I really want to point out is getting back to the wow slide. Remember the 4.7 million? And no one really said wow. But if you look at this, to hopefully show you that this is really doable, this is going back. Amanda, will you go back to the previous slide so we can get into the 1 through 5 year summary? It will show that sales for year 1, what we're assuming, is right around $425,000, which sounds like a lot, but if you look at that 4.7 million, that's 10%. And with the energy that we have from the growers here in the room and out in the audience, I think there's a lot that can be achieved. So year 1, that's what we're relating that 4.7 million just to a little over 400,000. So I apologize for not really being able to see the numbers, but we really tried to be as complete as we could and be conservative, and it still showed really good growth potential, that the project is financially feasible, and I think that's the most important thing. Certainly we can take some questions from our Staples audience, and do we have any questions here?
Jessica, your question is, what's the approximate population of the area that the food hub is serving, and that we mentioned 8 counties. We're looking through the feasibility study right now. I know it's in there. I'm gonna have a paper copy, but I wanted to point out that that 4.7 million that we talked about does not take into account the population expansion of our region for the summertime. This is based on the census of the residents of this region and not our summer traffic for any region.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting was when we went through and we said, okay, well, now we're going to just look at the Brainerd micropolitan. Yeah, there's there, and then there's the seasonal. We're just going to look at the Brainerd micropolitan area, again, trying to be super conservative, but we're going to look at seasonal residents. What we found was, including seasonal residents in the Brainerd micropolitan area, the total population is exactly the same as it is in the entire 8 counties. It's about 260,000 people. So again, if you're talking about the seasonal residents as well as the permanent residents, you're talking about doubling that $4.7 million just looking at the fresh produce.
And again, that's only the certain weeks. It's only the 15 out of the 42 weeks, and with different growing methods, that should hopefully expand. And the interesting, can I just add one other thing about when we looked at a number of different food hub studies from across the country and their financial data. Ours was much more detailed and we really felt that we needed to. But the one thing that our information did prove out it was about $1 million worth of sales where the break-even point happened. And again, if we can expand our season and really market the locally grown, that's very achievable. And once we increase those sales, all those overhead costs as a percentage of your sales, you know, they get covered and they trickle down, and it's just more profitability really for everybody, because if we can ultimately pay the farmers more for their product because we're selling so much more and our overhead costs as a percentage of sales are less, it's ultimately going to help the farmers, because Food Hub isn't going to accumulate, you know, bank accounts across the country and in the Caribbean. They're going to give it back to the farmers who are growing and try to better maybe add processing facilities or those types of things.
And one thing that struck me too, as Julie was talking, when you were saying that the farmers get 75 cents on the dollar. What was the statistic for Walmart food? 3 cents?
3 cents.
On the dollar. So you know, I mean, if we can really make this grow, and it'll benefit everyone.
I did have a question. How long has this been going on? Maybe you said it, maybe I missed it, from the beginning of the entire ideal thought to now. Like, how long has this been?
So the question is, how long has it been going on, the existing grassroots effort? How long has it been going on?
Specifically working with larger than just a few restaurant accounts for our farm. We are entering into our 4th year with Farm to School, moving from 1,000 pounds from just my farm the first year to 4,000 pounds from 4 area farms the second year, to over 17,000 pounds of food delivered to the school districts in September and October from 15 different farms last year. And we're still doing Farm to School. I picked up locally grown hydroponic romaine from one of the growers here in this room on Monday and delivered it to Brainerd High School, Crowing Food Co-op, Prairie Bay, Grandview Lodge, and the Hug campus in Pine River, and in March. And we've been moving local foods. I sold carrots. I sold my last potatoes in February. I could have sold, I mean, I just think there's the sky is the limit. There's no bounds. And that if you can learn to work within the capacity of our region with your season extension, your holding capacity, utilizing root cellars, there's no limit to what we can do. And if we can even get to the point where we can grow higher, better, longer, stronger using solar, the better off we're all going to be. There was a question here, which counties are in our region? Jessica, the answer to the question, the 8 counties, the population, you heard BJ say, is about 250,000 for them 8 counties. That population doubles in the summertime. Those 8 counties are Crow Wing, Cass, Todd, Morrison, Wadena, Mille Lacs, Aiken, and Otter Tail. Okay? So moving ahead, I skipped this one, Julie. Do we want to do this?
Well, there's just there's job creation as well. Not only does the Food Hub help the farmers, and hopefully you're hiring some part-time laborers and, you know, making a living for yourself, but the Food Hub would also have to hire some people to work there too. So there's job creation as well. So it's kind of a win-win for our community, that whole economic benefit.
And you'll see on this slide that the financial summary for the Food Hub shows that in year 3, there's a positive.
That's at break even in year 3, with about $1 million worth of sales if you go up from there. So, and again, the more you sell, the more that's going to go to the bottom line, because once your overhead is covered, you know, you're just more profitable. So it flips pretty quickly once you get past that point.
The next slide shows direct jobs for the Food Hub, full-time manager, director, and then what do we have? In year 1, we have 5.0 FTEs. In year 5, we have doubled direct jobs with the Food Hub to 11.5 positions. Okay, those are real living wage jobs. We did not create these jobs at minimum wage. These jobs are $12 to $15 to $25 an hour jobs with benefits. Okay, and that's really important these days to keep that in mind. These are very good jobs that are staying in our community.
Are there qualifying factors for joining? Like, let's say, you know, you talk about these small farms and stuff. Are there certain, like, regulations or, Is there membership fees, or how does that work with the hub?
For the hub, we'll get to a little bit of that in a little bit, but the answer is there's no membership fees. If it was run as a cooperative, it's not a cooperative, and the reason why we didn't do that is for a couple of reasons. After much consultation with attorneys and looking at food hubs throughout the country, and the research that went with that is that it became clear to us that it was financially advantageous for the food hub to not be a cooperative at this point. In order to have access to funding, in order to provide the capital to get it up and running. But knowing that there's a convert clause in the formation of the food hub, that at some point we would like to see it be a cooperative where it's farmer owned and farmer managed. There's a question about eggs. Can eggs be sold directly to restaurants, grocery stores, schools from the farm without any inspection? The answer is yes, with some licensing requirements with the Department of Ag and with some specific attention paid to the processing of those eggs. I would encourage you to get on the Department of Agriculture website. They've got a very good self-explanatory sheet on how you can do that. Indirect jobs. So according to a recent University of Wisconsin study, 2.2 jobs are created for every $100,000 in local food sales that are indirectly related to the food hub. So it's a grocery store hires another person, a food co-op hires another person to do, a school district hires another person to do the cooking and the prepping. And those are just three quick examples of indirect jobs. If you look at the total sales of the food hub, by year 5, you have 32 indirect jobs that are created in our region as a direct result of the food hub, in addition to the 11.0 direct jobs. Okay. This is extremely important data when you're out there looking for grant writing, because everybody wants to know, how are you creating jobs and how are you creating jobs? Okay, so when we talk about what you were talking about, so consumers, they want high quality products, and we're talking about all kinds of consumers, from food service directors to executive chefs to whoever is buying. Consistency and reliability. You heard me talk about the meat products. A lot of people won't buy meats because you can't raise enough beef to do 300 pounds of hamburger every day for a restaurant. That's just not feasible for a grower, and it's not feasible for a buyer. So they want consistency and they want reliability. A lot of grocery stores don't buy local foods because they don't have the consistency, where we don't have tomatoes year round and we don't have cucumbers year round, and it's just easier for them not to do local foods. But we're working on it. Good communication. One of the things that I do very, very well is when there's a product available, I'm on the phone, I'm moving the product. When I say there's going to be a product available and it's not, the first thing I'm doing is communicating with the person who I said was going to get it, letting them know that that product is not available. We created that structure when we worked with school districts. They order 2 weeks ahead of the time that they're going to serve it. So if I can't procure it, I have a week to procure it from the network of farmers. If I cannot get it, I have time to call that food service director and tell her, you need to order it from your regular distribution channels, so that food is on the plate for those kids on the day that that menu item comes up. That's good communication, and it's absolutely critical to have good communication. Season extension, as I said, in order to have that consistency, we need to learn how to get better at season extension. Liability insurance is a big one, and I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about it. When everybody knows about food safety, everybody knows about the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is still in writing, but the fact of the matter is that that rule is going to come down, and it's going to have an impact on every single grower who grows food. What that ramification of that is going to be based on a whole level of things, of how much you produce, how much you sell, where you sell it to, what kind of products you sell, et cetera. Grower or buyers that I work with want liability insurance. If I move a product through my channels into the school district and there's a problem with that food, I have to be able to trace that food back to where it came from. And if somebody gets sick and there's a problem with the food, in a litigious world, somebody's going to sue, and there needs to be liability insurance. And so I carry liability insurance that covers me for moving food through the food hub. I also have the formation of your business is also important. If you are not incorporated with the state of Minnesota, I would highly advise you to do so. That being formed as an LLC, limited liability corporation, protects my personal assets from my farming assets. So if somebody falls down on my farm, falls off the tractor and breaks their leg during a corn maze or a hayride, they can sue the farm and the farm assets, but they cannot come after my personal assets, which would include my retirement and 401k. It's really important for everybody to know what those things are, but also to know about liability insurance. Some buyers will not work with you if you do not have it. It's a very important part of your toolbox in marketing your farm, is to be able to say, I have liability insurance, and the peace of mind of knowing that you're covered. Consumers want to know that you are educated on post-harvest handling, that you have a HACCP plan, and that you understand limited processing capacity, which means under the state of Minnesota rules and laws, you are not allowed to process any of your product and bring it to a buyer unless it's done in a licensed facility under somebody who has a food manager certificate. If you are interested in that at all, I would strongly advise you contact your county health department, inspector, and learn what those rules and regs are. Same thing about food safety and traceability. I'm not exactly sure what that Food Safety Modernization Act is going to be. There's lots of data out there if you want to go look on the FDA website on that. We got a really nice flow chart, a draft flow chart on how that will affect you as a grower. I'm pretty sure that that rule is going to come down as how they have it written now. If you want to go look at it, it's on the FDA website now. And then a marketing plan. They want to know that you know what you're doing and that you're strong in your marketing and that you're confident as a grower and as a marketer. That marketing, all of those components, I should go back and tell you that every single one of these is what a food hub can help you do. Part of what the food hub that was formed, Sprout, Minnesota, is the food distribution part is the for-profit part for moving food, but it also was formed as a Minnesota nonprofit to be used as a technical advisor to be able to provide these kinds of services to groups of growers. So you kind of have a one-stop shop on where to go to get the information you need in order to advance your business, to advance your marketing. Where do I go to get a business plan? How do I get connected to Julie? Where do I go buy liability insurance? What does this mean to me? How does this affect my farm? How do I do marketing? Where's some good marketing techniques and stuff like that? A food hub can help you do all of that. Okay, miss anything? Okay, couple of questions. If your farm is a cooperation that gets sued, you cannot represent it. You have to have a lawyer, is what somebody says. I'm very happy to tell you that I don't know anything about that.
Call a lawyer.
Yeah, I don't, but I believe you. I believe that that is probably what has to happen. The other question is where is the best information on a licensed kitchen? BJ has Collier County Health Inspector. Every county has a health inspector. Every county that we work with anyway basically had a list of licensed facilities within the county.
It was a little bit hard to dig up. So you can send me an email. I'll post my email address if you're interested in the list, and I'll get you the list. Because it was a little bit hard to dig up. Some of the counties work with the state offices, and some of the counties have their local offices, so it was a little bit hard to actually compile that information. So I'd be happy to send you that list, and it's one less thing that you need to do.
But the Department of Ag is also a good resource for that. Okay, BJ just typed in her email address. For those of you who want to contact her for that information, you have full disclosure now. Okay.
No harassing emails, please.
No harassing emails, she said. So BJ, I'll let you talk about this one. This is kind of a lot of the resources we use to do this. And
yeah, this is just a list of resources that we thought, we weren't sure exactly who the audience was going to be tonight. And so we weren't sure if people were interested in trying to replicate a food hub in their regions, or if they were going to be growers who were going to be interested in working with the food hub in central Minnesota, or what exactly. So if you're interested in doing some more research on developing a food hub in your region, there's a ton of resources through the USDA, University of Minnesota, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a huge appendix in the back of the feasibility study that lists all of the sources of the information that we used in our study. Also want to put a little bit of a plug in for your Small Business Development Center. The SBDC and Julie were incredibly helpful in this study and the business plan for Sprout. And there are SBDCs all throughout the state of Minnesota that can help with your business planning. So say, for example, you want to know, am I making a profit from my carrots or not? Is this a waste of time? Then go talk to your Small Business Development Center. And it's free. Yes, yeah. It's an amazing service. And we've actually, I have another slide here for SBDC resources. So Julie would be a better one to.
No, yeah, there's 9 SBDCs around the state. And so depending on what county you are in, you contact that SBDC. You can go to the website and it'll show you that along with contact information for each of those SBDCs. And like we said, the service is free. It's a pretty amazing service for small business owners who typically could not afford a consultant on their own. So
I thought you had to pay like credits or something.
There are programs like at our SBDC, we offer a going into business class, which there's a $40 charge to go to that going into business class. But to meet with a counselor one-on-one, there is not a charge. Are you thinking of the farm management program, maybe?
No, I don't think so.
Are you thinking computerizing small business?
Not necessarily a class, but where you get one up, like when you meet with a counselor there.
No charge for ours. If you met with someone, there's a service that would help people set up their books, like QuickBooks. That there is a charge for, but just regular, straight Small Business Development Center counseling, no charge to meet with a counselor.
Okay, one other thing, this is the last slide, but I do want to let you guys know that University of Minnesota Regional Partnerships is putting on a series of farm to cafeteria workshops throughout the state. The Central Region will be hosting one here at the Staples campus on Wednesday, April 3rd. And many of the topics will be one-on-one breakout sessions regarding starting a farm to school program, starting farm to any kind of program. How do you get your business started? Or if you have started, how do you advance it to the next level? Also, some other requirements if you want to engage in some kind of business agreements with buyers, how do you do that? So there's 3 great breakout buyer tracks, and if you are or grower tracks, and if you're a buyer, there's 2 tracks for buyers. Includes Colette Polkamp, who's food service director for the school, Jenna DeMel, who runs the Lakewood Hospital Farm to Institution program, and then 2 great chefs who are also going to be talking about utilization of local foods. And you can find that. Amanda, you want to post that link, please? Thank you. So if you'd like more information, she already has her email up there. So if you want to go to the next level on that, please do. If you want to talk to me, email me. I did put the Sprout Minnesota website up there regarding the food hub. I'm more than happy to come to you or to sit down and talk at any time. If you are interested in pursuing advancing your businesses at all, doing some financial projections, I highly recommend Small Business Development Center. I've worked with Julie for a couple of years on a couple of different projects, and it has been very advantageous for me to know where I am financially in our businesses, and it's a great exercise, and it's free. Okay? So thank you very much. I need a drink of water. Any questions? Does anybody want any other kind of additional information? I have a note here from a guest who says, the laundry's done, the dishes are clean, the dogs are happy and tired, supper's hot, drive carefully. So that means I get to go home. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Is the chart with those categories and what you figured for labor costs, is that in the report?
It's in the report in the back, yes.
Okay, because I couldn't read it.
When you find it online, you can, expand. It's a PDF file, and when you
Is it in the feasibility?
I'm not sure.
study or
I think it's just in the business plan. I'm not sure.
You think so?
Do we have them
I
Can they
think there's
access
some
the
in-
business plan?
No,
I agree with the water balance. It's not that much labor.
no,
to-
it's not.
Per pound.
Mhm. But it's heavy and it's heavy lifting, and for packing it, you know, you can get 2 watermelon in a box, and so you've got a box for 2 watermelon.
You can't ship them very deep either.
Right.
When we used to get them, they were too deep in the semi,
Mm-hmm,
and we used to go in there and pinch them out. You see them at the grocery store, they come with great big boxes. Well,
Yeah.
I used to stand inside of them, and catch them, and set them in the box.
Wow.
Okay.
You know, you can't ship them that way for more than 15.
So one thing I wanted to clarify is that, so the feasibility study, the purpose of the feasibility study was to kind of say like, is there a market? Is this reasonable for us to pursue a business plan? And so the business plan, that is where all the financials that Julie was talking about are in. So if you would like a copy of that, please send me an email and I will send you a copy of the financials from the business plan.
Everybody would fill out his evaluation, appreciate that.
I think